Hi, I'm Zoe Hartwell. And 6 months ago, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. My engagement had shattered into 1,000 pieces, leaving me with nothing but an empty apartment and a $35,000 custom sapphire ring that felt like a beautiful curse. What I didn't know was that my sister Chloe had been watching, waiting, planning. She didn't just steal my ring, she stole my entire future and tried to pass it off as her own fairy tale. But when her fiancé Marcus called me sobbing at 2 a.m., confessing everything through broken tears, I realized this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of the most satisfying chapter I'd ever written. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning it all started to unravel, I was sitting in my Pearl District loft with coffee that had gone cold hours ago, staring at the engagement ring box I couldn't bring myself to return. The custom sapphire sparkled against the gray Portland sky filtering through my windows, each facet catching light like trapped tears. Dylan and I had designed it together during happier times, when we believed in forever and thought love was enough to build a life on. The center stone was a rare Kashmir sapphire, surrounded by diamonds that formed delicate branches. A tree of life, he'd called it. Now it just felt like a monument to my failure. The apartment around me reflected my current state perfectly. Boxes half-packed from when Dylan and I were supposed to move in together still sat in corners, gathering dust like abandoned dreams. My graphic design projects scattered across the dining table seemed meaningless compared to the weight of that little velvet box. I'd been working from home for 3 weeks, avoiding the pitying looks from my colleagues at the tech startup downtown. Everyone knew about the broken engagement. In a city like Portland, news traveled fast through the creative community. My phone buzzed against the marble countertop, Dylan's name flashing across the screen. My stomach clenched the way it always did when he called, torn between hope and dread. We'd been trying to navigate the aftermath of our relationship with some semblance of dignity, but every conversation felt like walking through a minefield of what we used to be. "Hey," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Zoe, I know this is awkward, but I need to ask you something." His voice carried that familiar tension that had become our new normal. "My mom keeps asking about the ring. She wants to know if you're planning to return it or if we need to handle insurance paperwork." He trailed off and I could picture him running his hand through his dark hair the way he always did when stressed. The ring represented 3 years of saving, of planning, of dreaming together. Dylan had worked overtime for months to afford it, and I knew his family had contributed to make it possible. From a purely logical standpoint, returning it was the right thing to do. From an emotional standpoint, letting go of it felt like admitting our entire relationship had been meaningless. "I'll bring it by this weekend," I heard myself say, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "Maybe Saturday afternoon." "That works. And Zoe?" His voice softened in a way that still made my chest ache. "I'm sorry it ended this way. You deserved better." After he hung up, I sat in the silence of my loft, surrounded by the remnants of the life I'd thought I was building. The rain outside had started in earnest, typical Pacific Northwest weather that matched my mood perfectly. I opened the ring box one more time, letting myself memorize every detail before I'd have to say goodbye forever. The sapphire seemed to pulse with its own inner light, and I found myself thinking about the day we'd chosen it together. "This one," Dylan had said, pointing to the Kashmir sapphire in the jeweler's case. "It matches your eyes when you're really happy." The memory stung now, but I held onto it anyway. Some things were worth remembering, even when they hurt. I closed the box with a decisive snap and placed it in the small safe I kept in my bedroom closet, just until Saturday. Just until I could find the strength to let it go completely. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that made Portland feel like the edge of the world. I was deep into a logo design project, trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of creative work, when my apartment buzzer rang. The sound cut through my concentration like a knife and I glanced at the clock. 7:30. "I wasn't expecting anyone." "Zoe, it's me, can I come up?" Chloe's voice crackled through the intercom, bright and cheerful, as always. My sister had a way of showing up unannounced that used to feel spontaneous and fun, but lately it just felt intrusive. Still, she was family, and despite everything, I loved her. I buzzed her up and heard her heels clicking against the stairs. Chloe never wore practical shoes, even in Portland rain. When I opened my door, she swept in like a small tornado, shaking raindrops from her perfectly styled blonde hair, and carrying takeout bags that smelled like Thai food. "Surprise! I brought pad Thai and gossip," she announced, setting the bags on my kitchen counter with the confidence of someone who'd never been turned away. "You've been hiding in here for weeks, and I'm staging an intervention." Chloe was 2 years younger than my 28, but she'd always carried herself like she was the older sister. Where I was tall and angular with dark hair that never quite behaved, she was petite and golden, the kind of woman who looked effortlessly put together even in jeans and a rain jacket. Her lifestyle blog had gained serious traction over the past year, and she'd developed a following of women who wanted to recreate her seemingly perfect life. "I'm not hiding," I protested, though we both knew it was a lie. "I'm working on what? Becoming one with your cow." She unpacked containers of food with the efficiency of someone on a mission. "When's the last time you left this place for something other than groceries?" I couldn't actually remember, which proved her point. Chloe had always been the social butterfly of our family, the one who made friends easily and navigated relationships like she was born knowing the rules. She'd been married briefly in her early 20s, a Vegas wedding that lasted 8 months, but she talked about it like it was a fun adventure rather than a failure. Everything bounced off Chloe like she was made of rubber. "Dylan called today," I said, accepting the container of pad thai she thrust into my hands. "I'm returning the ring this weekend." Something flickered across her face, so quick I almost missed it. Interest? Calculation? But then she was hugging me, enveloping me in her signature vanilla perfume and genuine warmth. "Oh honey, that's probably for the best. Closure and all that." She pulled back to study my face with those bright, blue eyes that had gotten her out of trouble our entire childhood. "But are you sure you're ready? Maybe you should wait a little longer." "Ready or not, it's time," I said, surprised by how final it sounded. Keeping it isn't helping anyone. We settled onto my couch with our food, and Chloe launched into stories about her latest blog collaborations and the influencer events she'd been attending. Her life sounded impossibly glamorous compared to my current hermit existence. Full of photo shoots and brand partnerships and networking dinners, she had a way of making even mundane activities sound like adventure. "Oh, and I have news," she said between bites, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Marcus proposed." I nearly choked on my pad thai. Marcus Reed was Chloe's boyfriend of 6 months, a software developer she'd met through mutual friends. He was sweet and steady, the kind of man who brought her coffee without being asked and remembered her friends' names. I'd liked him immediately, which was more than I could say for most of her previous boyfriends. "Chloe, that's amazing. When?" I set down my food, genuinely excited for her despite my own romantic disaster. "Show me the ring." She laughed and held up her bare left hand. "Soon." He wanted to pick it out together, which is so thoughtful, right? "We're going ring shopping this weekend." Her smile faltered slightly. "I know the timing is weird with everything you're going through, but I couldn't not tell you." "Don't be ridiculous. This is wonderful news." I pulled her into another hug, meaning every word. "Marcus is perfect for you." "He really is," she said softly, and for a moment she looked younger, more vulnerable. "I never thought I'd want to try marriage again, but with him, it feels different. Real." We spent the rest of the evening planning her engagement party and talking about wedding ideas. Chloe had always been a dreamer, and watching her light up talking about her future with Marcus reminded me why I loved her so much. She had this gift for making everything feel possible, like the world was full of opportunities just waiting to be seized. When she left around 10, she hugged me extra tight at the door. "I'm so proud of you for moving forward with the ring thing," she said. "It takes real strength to let go." I went to bed that night feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Maybe Chloe was right. Maybe returning the ring would help me move forward instead of staying trapped in the past. Maybe this was exactly what I needed to start rebuilding my life. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, one of those perfect Pacific Northwest days that reminded you why people moved to Portland despite the rain. I'd spent Friday evening cleaning my apartment and organizing my thoughts, preparing myself mentally for what felt like the final chapter of my relationship with Dylan. The ring box sat on my kitchen counter, a small blue velvet reminder of the conversation I needed to have. Dylan lived in a craftsman house in the Hawthorne district, the kind of place we'd dreamed of buying together someday. I'd helped him paint the living room walls a warm gray last spring, back when touching up his paint job felt like practicing for our shared future. Now, standing on his front porch with the ring box in my purse, those memories felt like they belonged to different people. He answered the door looking tired but relieved, his dark hair still messy from sleep. "Hey, come in. I made coffee." The house smelled like coffee and wood polish, exactly the way I remembered. His acoustic guitar leaned against the wall where he'd left it during our last fight, and I could see his laptop open on the dining table, probably working on one of his freelance web development projects. Everything was exactly the same, except for the absence of my things, my presence, my future in these rooms. "Thanks," I said, accepting the mug he offered. The coffee was perfect. He'd remembered exactly how I liked it, which somehow made everything harder. "How have you been? Keeping busy?" "You know how it is," he gestured toward his laptop. "Lots of work, lots of Netflix, trying to figure out what normal looks like now." We sat in his living room making careful small talk, avoiding the landmines of shared memories scattered around us. The throw pillows I'd bought for his couch, the bookshelf we'd assembled together, our books still mixed together, like we hadn't quite figured out how to separate our lives completely, the window where we used to sit together on weekend mornings, planning our days and our dreams. Finally, I reached into my purse and pulled out the ring box. The moment it appeared, the careful politeness between us cracked, revealing the raw hurt underneath. "Zoe, you don't have to do this if you're not ready," Dylan said quietly. "I know my mom was pushing, but there's no timeline here. Take all the time you need." "I'm ready," I said, though my voice shook slightly. "This belongs with you and your family. It was never really mine to keep." He took the box with hands that weren't quite steady, opening it slowly. The sapphire caught the morning light streaming through his windows, brilliant and beautiful, and heartbreaking. For a moment neither of us spoke, both lost in memories of what this ring had represented. "God, it's still beautiful," he whispered. "I look at it and I can still see your face when I proposed. You were so surprised even though we'd picked it out together." The proposal had been perfect in its simplicity. Dylan had taken me to our favorite hiking spot in Forest Park, and when we reached the viewpoint overlooking the city, he'd gotten down on one knee right there on the trail. I'd said yes before he could even finish asking, laughing and crying at the same time while other hikers cheered in the background. "That was a good day," I said softly. "One of the best." "Yeah, it was." He closed the box with a decisive click. "I'm sorry, Zoe, for all of it. For not being what you needed, for letting my work consume everything, for making you feel like you were competing with my career for my attention." The apology I'd been waiting months to hear finally came, and it should have felt like closure. Instead, it just felt sad, like the end of a song that had been beautiful but was always meant to be temporary. "We both made mistakes," I said, meaning it. "We just wanted different things, and that's nobody's fault." When I left his house an hour later, I felt hollow but clean, like I'd finally set down a weight I'd been carrying for months. The ring was where it belonged, and I was free to figure out what came next. I drove home through the sunny Portland streets, feeling like I could breathe fully for the first time since our breakup. Monday brought a return to routine that felt almost normal. I went back to my downtown office for the first time in weeks, ready to throw myself into work and start rebuilding my professional momentum. My colleagues at the tech startup welcomed me back with carefully casual warmth, asking about my weekend without mentioning the elephant in the room. It felt good to be around people again, to remember that I had a life and an identity beyond my failed relationship. I was deep into a rebranding project for a local coffee roaster when my phone rang Tuesday afternoon. Chloe's name flashed across the screen, and I answered expecting to hear about wedding planning or ring shopping adventures. "Zoe," her voice bubbled with excitement, "you'll never guess what happened. Marcus found the perfect ring, and it's absolutely stunning. I can't wait for you to see." "That's wonderful. When do I get to meet this mystery ring?" "Actually, that's why I'm calling. We're having a little engagement party this Friday at Mom and Dad's house. Nothing fancy, just family and close friends. Can you come? Please say you'll come." Our parents still lived in the same Beaverton house where we'd grown up, a comfortable suburban home with a big backyard perfect for gatherings. Mom loved any excuse to host a party, and she'd probably been planning the menu since the moment Chloe called with her news. Of course I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it. Perfect. Oh, and Zoe? Thank you for being so supportive. I know this timing isn't ideal for you, but having my sister there means everything. Friday evening found me standing in my childhood bedroom, trying to decide between 3 different dresses. I'd chosen something cheerful but not attention-grabbing, navy blue with small flowers that felt appropriately celebratory without trying to compete with the guest of honor. The face looking back at me in my old mirror seemed steadier than it had in months, like returning the ring had allowed some essential part of me to settle back into place. Downstairs, the house buzzed with familiar energy. Mom had outdone herself with decorations, stringing lights through the dining room and setting up a champagne station in the living room. Dad manned the grill on the back patio, wearing the world's greatest dad apron Chloe and I had given him years ago. The smell of barbecue and Mom's famous potato salad filled the air, mixing with laughter and conversation from the 24 guests scattered throughout the house. I found Chloe in the kitchen, glowing in a white sundress that made her look like a Disney princess. She was surrounded by friends admiring her ring, holding her hand up to catch the light while she told the story of Marcus's proposal. From across the room I could see the flash of sapphire and diamonds, and my breath caught in my throat. The ring was beautiful. Stunning, actually. A gorgeous sapphire surrounded by diamonds in an intricate setting that caught the light from every angle. It was the kind of ring that made people stop and stare, the kind that belonged on the hand of someone living a charmed life. It was also my ring. The exact ring I'd returned to Dylan just 5 days earlier. I stood frozen in the doorway, my brain struggling to process what my eyes were seeing. The Kashmir sapphire with its distinctive deep blue color, the diamond branches forming a tree of life around the center stone. The platinum setting that Dylan and I had chosen together after weeks of comparing options. Every detail was exactly as I remembered, down to the small inscription inside the band that read, "Forever begins today," in Dylan's careful handwriting. Chloe spotted me across the room and waved me over, her smile radiant. "Come see my ring. Isn't it gorgeous?" I walked toward her on legs that felt disconnected from my body, my heart hammering so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. Up close there was no doubt, this was my ring. The ring I'd worn for 8 months, the ring Dylan had proposed with, the ring I'd returned just days ago, thinking I was doing the right thing. "It's beautiful," I managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Really stunning." "Marcus has such incredible taste," Chloe gushed, holding her hand up to admire the sapphire. "He said he wanted something unique, something that would suit my personality. I think he nailed it, don't you?" Around us, friends and family members murmured agreement, complimenting the ring's beauty and Marcus's thoughtfulness. I nodded and smiled and made appropriate sounds, all while my world tilted sideways. How was this possible? How did my sister end up wearing the ring I'd just returned to my ex-fiancé? And why was she acting like she'd never seen it before, when she'd been to my apartment dozens of times while I was wearing it? Marcus appeared at Chloe's side, slipping his arm around her waist with the easy affection of a man deeply in love. He was beaming with pride, looking like he'd just pulled off the proposal of the century. When his eyes met mine, I searched his face for any sign of guilt or recognition, but found only genuine happiness. "Zoe, I'm so glad you could make it," he said warmly. "What do you think of the ring? I spent weeks looking for the perfect one." "It's perfect," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Absolutely perfect." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and celebration. I moved through the party like a sleepwalker, making conversation and eating Mom's potato salad, and trying to act like my entire world hadn't just shifted off its axis. Every few minutes I found myself staring at Chloe's left hand, hoping I'd imagined the whole thing, but the sapphire gleamed back at me with undeniable familiarity. When I finally escaped to the quiet of the back patio, Dad found me standing by his tomato plants, staring out at the yard where Chloe and I had played as children. "You okay, sweetheart? You seem a little quiet tonight." Dad had always been perceptive, able to read his daughter's moods, even when we tried to hide them. He stood beside me in comfortable silence, waiting for me to find my words, just processing everything, I guess. "Big changes for the family. Chloe seems happy," he said carefully. "Really happy. It's nice to see her so settled, And Marcus seems like a good man. He does, I agreed, because it was true. Marcus had always seemed genuine and kind, exactly the type of person I'd want my sister to marry, which made this whole situation even more confusing. You know, Dad continued, I was worried about Chloe for a while. After her first marriage fell apart, she went through a rough patch, started making some questionable choices, hanging around with people who weren't the best influence, but she seems to have found her way. I turned to look at him, surprised. I didn't know she was struggling. She always seemed so confident, so sure of herself. Your sister is very good at appearing confident, Dad said with a slight smile. But sometimes the people who seem the strongest are the ones who need the most support. I'm just glad she found someone who sees her worth. We stood in comfortable silence as the party continued around us, the sound of laughter and conversation drifting from the house. I wanted to tell Dad what I'd discovered, wanted to share my confusion and hurt, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain what I'd seen without sounding crazy or vindictive? How could I accuse my sister of something so unthinkable, without proof? When I left the party an hour later, I hugged Chloe goodbye and congratulated her again, playing my part perfectly. But as I drove home through the Portland streets, my mind raced with questions that had no easy answers. How had Dylan's ring ended up on my sister's finger? Was this some kind of horrible coincidence, or was something darker at play? I spent the rest of the weekend researching custom jewelry, trying to convince myself that Marcus could have independently commissioned an identical ring, but the sapphire's distinctive color and the exact design of the diamond setting made that explanation seem impossible. Kashmir sapphires were rare and expensive, and the Tree of Life design had been Dylan's specific request, inspired by a poem he'd read about growing love. By Monday morning I knew I had to talk to Dylan. Whatever was happening, he deserved to know where his ring had ended up, and I deserved to understand how my sister had come to possess the most important piece of jewelry I'd ever owned. The conversation I was about to have would change everything, but I couldn't live with the weight of what I'd discovered. Some truths were too big to carry alone, even when revealing them might destroy the family I loved. Dylan answered his phone on the second ring, his voice carrying that familiar mix of surprise and wariness that had become our post-breakup communication style. I was sitting in my car outside a coffee shop in southeast Portland, having driven aimlessly for an hour while working up the courage to make this call. Zoe, is everything okay? I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone white. The ring, I returned to you on Saturday. What did you do with it? There was a long pause, and I could hear him moving around what sounded like his kitchen. Why are you asking? Dylan, please, just answer the question. Another pause, longer this time. I sold it. I took it to that jewelry store downtown, the one where we first looked at rings. They gave me a decent price for it, and I figured it was better than having it sit in a drawer forever. My stomach dropped into my shoes. Which jewelry store? Henderson's Fine Jewelry on Pioneer Square. Yeah, that's the one. Zoe, what's going on? You sound upset. I closed my eyes, trying to process this information. Henderson's was where Marcus claimed he'd found the perfect ring for Chloe. The coincidence was too significant to ignore. When did you sell it? What day? What time? Saturday afternoon, maybe around 3 o'clock. Right after you left, actually. I didn't want to sit with it any longer than necessary. His voice grew concerned. Seriously, what's happening? You're scaring me. I told him about the engagement party, about seeing the ring on Chloe's finger, about the impossible situation I'd discovered. Dylan listened in stunned silence, occasionally making small sounds of disbelief. That's impossible, he said finally. Are you sure it's the same ring? I mean, there are other sapphire rings out there. Dylan, I wore that ring for 8 months. I know every facet, every detail. It's the same ring. But how would Marcus even know to look for it? How would he know it was available? That was the question that had been haunting me since Friday night. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. After hanging up with Dylan, I sat in my car watching Portland life move around. Cyclists pedaled past in the bike lane. People emerged from coffee shops with their Monday morning fuel, and the city hummed with the kind of productive energy I used to be part of. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. I drove to Henderson's Fine Jewelry, the upscale shop in downtown Portland where Dylan and I had spent hours browsing engagement rings 2 years ago. The owner, Mrs. Henderson, was a woman in her 60s who treated every customer like they were buying the crown jewel. She remembered every ring she sold and every story behind it. The shop was elegant in that understated way that whispered expensive rather than shouting it. Glass cases filled with sparkling diamonds and colored gemstones lined the walls, and soft classical music played in the background. Miss Henderson looked up from behind the counter as I entered, her face lighting up with recognition. "Zoe, dear, how lovely to see you. How are you enjoying married life?" My heart clenched. She didn't know about the breakup, didn't know that the fairy tale she'd helped create had crumbled. "Actually, Mrs. Henderson, that's why I'm here. Dylan and we ended our engagement a few months ago. He returned the ring here on Saturday." Her expression immediately shifted to one of sympathy and concern. "Oh, my dear. I'm so sorry. These things happen, of course, but it's never easy." "Yes, Dylan brought the ring in Saturday afternoon. Such a beautiful piece. I was sorry to see it come back. I was wondering, did you sell it again? So quickly?" Mrs. Henderson nodded, her professional demeanor returning. "Actually, yes, a young man came in just hours after Dylan left. He'd been looking for something very specific. And when he saw the sapphire, he said it was exactly what he'd been dreaming of. He paid full price without negotiating, which is unusual for such an expensive piece. Do you remember anything about him?" "His name?" She hesitated, and I could see her weighing customer confidentiality against her obvious concern for me. "I probably shouldn't say, but given the circumstances, his name was Marcus Reed. Lovely young man. Very excited about proposing to his girlfriend. He said he'd been searching for months for the perfect ring." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. Marcus had bought my ring, knowing exactly what he was looking for. This wasn't a coincidence or a twist of fate. This was planned. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask you something else. Had Marcus been in here before? Had he seen the ring previously?" She frowned, thinking carefully. "You know, now that you mention it, he did seem familiar. I think he might have come in a few weeks ago with a young woman, blonde, very pretty. They were looking at rings together, but they didn't buy anything that day." My blood turned to ice. Chloe had been ring shopping with Marcus weeks ago, before my engagement had even officially ended. She'd seen the rings in the store, maybe even seen mine if it had been there for cleaning or sizing. She would have recognized it instantly when it appeared in the case on Saturday. "The woman he was with," I said carefully. "Did she seem interested in any particular style?" "Oh yes. She was quite taken with the vintage pieces. She had excellent taste actually, but they left without purchasing anything. When Marcus came back on Saturday, he was alone and very focused. He knew exactly what he wanted." I thanked Mrs. Henderson and left the store feeling like I was drowning in my own life. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, creating a picture I didn't want to see. Chloe had known about my ring, had seen it in the store, and had somehow orchestrated Marcus buying it for her. But why? And how much did Marcus know about what he'd done? That evening I called Kiara, my closest friend since college, and the one person I trusted to help me think through this nightmare. Kiara was a lawyer specializing in family law, which meant she'd seen every kind of betrayal and deception humans were capable of. If anyone could help me navigate this situation, it was her. "Let me get this straight," Kiara said after I'd explained everything. "Your sister is wearing your engagement ring, which her fiancé bought from the same store your ex sold it to, just hours after he sold it, and you think this was planned. I don't know what to think, but the timing is too convenient. The fact that they'd been to that specific store before, the fact that Marcus seemed to know exactly what he was looking for. Okay. But here's what I don't understand. What would Chloe gain from this? It's not like she needed to steal a ring. From what you've told me, Marcus has money. He could have bought her any ring she wanted. That was the question I'd been avoiding because the answer was too painful to consider. Maybe it wasn't about the ring itself. Maybe it was about having something that was mine. Kiara was quiet for a long moment. Zoe, that's a serious accusation. You're essentially saying your sister sabotaged your life to steal your jewelry. That's sociopathic behavior. I know how it sounds, but what other explanation is there? Maybe Marcus saw the ring, fell in love with it, and bought it without knowing its history. Maybe Chloe doesn't know where it came from. Maybe this really is just a horrible coincidence. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that my sister wasn't capable of the kind of calculated cruelty this scenario required, but something deep in my gut told me otherwise. There's one way to find out, I said. I need to talk to Marcus alone. Marcus worked at a tech company in the Pearl District, not far from my own office. I'd visited him there once before, when Chloe had asked me to drop off his birthday present, because she was stuck in a brand photo shoot. The building was modern glass and steel, the kind of place that hummed with innovation and ambition. I waited in the lobby Tuesday afternoon, watching employees come and go while I rehearsed what I was going to say. How do you ask someone if they knowingly bought your engagement ring? How do you accuse your sister's fiancé of being part of a scheme to hurt you? Marcus appeared at exactly 5:15. Looking surprised but pleased to see me. He was a good-looking man in an understated way, with kind eyes and the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who spent his days focused on code rather than appearance. Zoe, what a nice surprise. Are you here to see someone? Actually, I was hoping to catch. Do you have a few minutes to talk, maybe grab coffee? Of course, there's a great place around the corner. We walked to a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop, the kind of neighborhood spot that felt intimate enough for difficult conversation. Marcus chatted easily about work and Portland's unusually sunny weather, completely unaware of the storm brewing between us. Once we were settled with our drinks, I took a deep breath and dove in. Marcus, I need to ask you about Chloe's ring, the one you gave her. His face lit up with pride. Isn't it beautiful? I spent weeks looking for the perfect piece. I wanted something unique, something that would show her how special she is. Where did you find it? Henderson's Fine Jewelry downtown. Amazing place, they have some incredible pieces. The ring was exactly what I'd been picturing for her. I studied his face carefully, looking for any sign of deception or guilt. Had you been to Henderson's before? Actually, yes, Chloe and I went a few weeks ago just to get an idea of what she liked. She has such sophisticated taste. I wanted to make sure I got something she'd love. And did she see anything she particularly liked during that visit? Marcus paused, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. Something in my tone must have alerted him that this wasn't casual conversation. Why are you asking? Is something wrong? I made a decision that would change everything between us. Between me and Chloe. Between our entire family. Marcus, the ring you bought for Chloe is my engagement ring, the one Dylan proposed to me. He sold it to Henderson's on Saturday, and you bought it the same day. The color drained from Marcus's face. His coffee cup clattered against the saucer as he set it down with shaking hands. That's impossible. The salesperson said it had just come in, that it was a consignment piece from an estate sale. Mrs. Henderson told me you came in specifically looking for that ring. She said you seemed to know exactly what you wanted. Marcus stared at me in horror, his mind clearly racing through the implications. Zoe, I swear to you, I had no idea. I mean, I thought it looked familiar when I saw it, but I figured I'd just seen something similar online or in a magazine. Chloe has shown me so many ring photos over the past few months. She showed you ring photos? Constantly. She has a Pinterest board with hundreds of engagement rings. She was always sending me links, pointing out details she liked. I thought she was just excited about the possibility of getting engaged. My heart sank as another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Chloe had been showing Marcus pictures of engagement rings, including pictures of mine. She'd been programming him to recognize it, to want it, to choose it when the time came. Marcus, I need you to think carefully. When you went to Henderson's together, did Chloe point out any specific rings? Did she seem interested in anything particular? He was quiet for a long time, his face growing paler as he thought. Oh God, there was this one ring. She spent a long time looking at it, kept coming back to it. She said it was exactly the style she'd want if she ever got engaged again, but it wasn't for sale. The owner said it was there for cleaning or sizing. Something like that. What did the ring look like? Sapphire and diamonds, tree of life setting. It was. He stopped, understanding flooding his features. It was the same ring. It was your ring. We sat in stunned silence as the full scope of what had happened became clear. Chloe had seen my ring at the jeweler, had known it would eventually be sold, and had spent weeks preparing Marcus to want it. She'd shown him photos, pointed it out in person, and programmed his preferences, so that when the time came, he would choose my ring over any other. She planned this, Marcus said quietly, more to himself than to me. She actually planned this. I think so. But why would she do something like this? I didn't have an answer for him. The sister I'd grown up with, the woman who'd brought me Thai food when I was heartbroken, the person I'd celebrated with just days ago, had orchestrated one of the cruelest betrayals I could imagine, and I still didn't understand why. Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I need to call her. I need to ask her about this. Wait. I reached across the table to stop him. Before you do that, I need to ask you something else. Has Chloe ever seemed jealous of me? Has she ever said anything about feeling like I got things she didn't? He frowned, thinking. Not directly, but there have been comments, little things about how you always seem to have it together, how you got the stable career and the perfect relationship. She said once that you made everything look so easy, like success just came naturally to you. When did she say that? A few months ago. Around the time you and Dylan broke up. She was actually really upset about it. Said she felt bad that you were going through such a hard time. She kept saying she wished she could do something to help. The irony was suffocating. While I'd been drowning in the aftermath of my broken engagement, Chloe had been positioning herself to literally take the ring off my finger and claim it as her own. Her expressions of sympathy had been preparation for theft. Marcus, whatever you decide to do about this, I want you to know that I don't blame you. You were manipulated too. He looked up at me with eyes full of pain and confusion. What kind of person does something like that? What kind of person manipulates someone they claim to love? I didn't have an answer for that either, but I was starting to realize I'd never really known my sister at all. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, Chloe's contact information glowing on the screen. Part of me wanted to call her immediately, to confront her with what I'd discovered and demand an explanation, but another part of me knew that once I made that call there would be no going back. Our relationship, our family, everything would change forever. Instead, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything I knew, the timeline of events, the conversations I'd had, the evidence I'd gathered. If I was going to accuse my sister of orchestrating this betrayal, I needed to be absolutely certain of my facts. As I typed, my phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. Thank you again for being so supportive at the party. Having you there meant the world to me. Love you, sis. I stared at the message, struck by the casual cruelty of. She was thanking me for celebrating her theft of my ring, for playing the role of supportive sister while she paraded my stolen property in front of our family. But what chilled me most was the realization that this level of deception required long-term planning and complete disregard for my feelings. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a spontaneous decision. This was calculated, deliberate, and deeply personal. My phone rang. jolting me out of my thoughts. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and I answered immediately. Zoe. His voice was strained, exhausted. I talked to her. What did she say? She denied everything at first, said it was impossible, that I was being paranoid, that you were just upset about your breakup and looking for someone to blame. He paused, taking a shaky breath. But when I pressed her about the ring at Henderson's, about the photos she'd shown me, she finally broke down. My heart hammered against my ribs. She admitted it. She said she never meant for it to go this far. She said she saw your ring at the jewelry store and thought it was beautiful, and maybe she mentioned it to me a few times, but she never meant for me to actually buy it. She said it was just a horrible coincidence. Do you believe her? Another long pause. No, I don't. Because when I asked her why she didn't tell me the truth when she recognized the ring at our engagement party, she couldn't answer. She just kept crying and saying she was sorry, that she didn't know how to fix it. What are you going to do? I don't know. I love her, Zoe. I really do. But I don't know how to come back from this. How do you build a marriage with someone who's capable of this kind of manipulation? I felt terrible for him. Marcus was a good man who'd thought he was marrying the woman of his dreams, only to discover she'd orchestrated their entire relationship around stolen property and deception. I'm going to return the ring to you, he said finally. It was never mine to give, and it was never hers to accept. This whole engagement is built on a lie. Marcus, you don't have to do that. The ring is legally yours now. You bought it. That doesn't make it right. I'll bring it by tomorrow evening if that's okay. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, processing the magnitude of what had happened. My sister had systematically destroyed my relationship with Dylan through her actions, manipulated an innocent man into becoming her unknowing accomplice, and stolen the most meaningful piece of jewelry I'd ever owned. And she'd done it all while playing the role of supportive sister, hugging me at family gatherings and bringing me comfort food during my darkest moments. The next evening, Marcus arrived at my apartment looking haggard and older than his 30 years. He handed me a small velvet box without ceremony, his hands shaking slightly. I'm sorry, he said simply. I'm sorry this happened to you and I'm sorry I was part of it, even unknowingly. I opened the box and there it was, the Kashmir sapphire that had once represented my future with Dylan. It looked exactly the same, but everything about its meaning had changed. This wasn't just my engagement ring anymore. It was evidence of my sister's betrayal, a symbol of how completely I'd misunderstood the people closest to me. What happens now? I asked. I don't know. I broke up with her tonight. She begged me to reconsider, said she'd do anything to make it right, but I can't marry someone I don't trust. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that reminded me painfully of Dylan. I keep thinking about all the things she said and did over the past few months, wondering what else was manipulation. Did she really love me, or was I just a convenient way to get what she wanted? I think she did love you, I said, meaning it. I think that's what makes this so complicated. I don't think she's evil, Marcus. I think she's broken in a way that makes her do terrible things to people she cares about. He nodded sadly. Maybe, but I can't build a life with someone's brokenness. I deserve better than that. We both do. After Marcus left, I sat with the ring box in my hands, trying to decide what to do with it. I could return it to Dylan again, but that felt wrong somehow. The ring had been tainted by everything that had happened, and giving it back wouldn't erase the betrayal, or fix what had been broken. I could keep it, but looking at it would always remind me of this nightmare, and I could sell it myself, but that felt like profiting from my sister's cruelty. In the end, I put the box back in my safe and tried to forget about it, but I knew I wouldn't be able to ignore it forever. Eventually, I'd have to decide what to do with this beautiful, cursed piece of my past. The next few days passed in a strange kind of limbo. I went to work, came home, ate dinner, and tried to pretend my world hadn't imploded. But every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be Chloe calling to explain herself or apologize, or beg for forgiveness. Instead, the call that changed everything came from a number I didn't recognize. At 2 o'clock on a Thursday morning, I answered it in a sleep-confused haze, expecting a wrong number, or emergency. Zoe? The voice was male, unfamiliar, and thick with tears. "This is Marcus. I'm sorry to call so late, but I didn't know who else to talk to." I sat up in bed, instantly alert. "Marcus? What's wrong?" "She's been calling me non-stop since Monday, showing up at my apartment, at my office. She won't accept that it's over." His voice broke slightly. "Tonight she told me everything, the whole truth, and it's so much worse than we thought." Marcus's words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I wasn't sure I wanted to understand. I could hear him breathing raggedly on the other end of the line, the sound of someone who'd been crying for hours. "What do you mean, everything?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want the answer. "Can I come over?" I can't say this over the phone, and I have things to show you, evidence." 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in my living room, looking like he'd aged a decade since I'd seen him 3 days ago. His usually neat hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone whose entire reality had been shattered. He carried a laptop bag and a manila folder stuffed with paper. When he set them on my coffee table, his hands shook so badly, he nearly dropped everything. "She kept records," he said without preamble. "Screenshots, notes, plans, everything. She documented her entire scheme like it was some kind of business project." He opened the laptop and turned it toward me. The screen showed Chloe's Pinterest account, but not the public boards I'd seen before. These were private boards with names like Zia's Style and Operation Perfect Ring, and "She's been tracking your life for over a year," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "Look at this." He clicked on the board labeled Zia's. It contained hundreds of photos of me, some taken from my social media accounts, others that looked like they'd been snapped secretly at family gatherings. Photos of my outfits, my jewelry, my apartment, even screenshots of my professional portfolio. She'd cataloged my entire aesthetic like she was studying for an exam. "This is from 18 months ago," Marcus said, pointing to a photo of me at our cousin's wedding, wearing a blue dress and the engagement ring. "She saved every picture of you wearing that ring." She knew exactly what it looked like from every angle. My stomach churned as I scrolled through the board. There were photos of me and Dylan together, images of our apartment, screenshots of my Instagram stories from our weekend trip. She'd been documenting my relationship in obsessive detail, and I'd never noticed. "The Operation Perfect Ring board is worse," Marcus said quietly. This board was a masterclass in calculated manipulation. Screenshots of Dylan's social media posts, showing his work stress and our relationship problems, research on engagement ring resale values, photos of Henderson's fine jewelry with detailed notes about their policies and procedures, and most chilling of all, a timeline documenting Dylan's and my fights, with notes about when our relationship was most vulnerable. "She knew you two were having problems before you did," Marcus said. "Look at this entry from 4 months ago." A note in Chloe's handwriting read, "Z&D fighting about his work schedule again. He stayed late 3 nights this week." She posted sad song lyrics on her story, relationship stress increasing, timeline moving forward. "Timeline for what?" I whispered. Marcus clicked on the board labeled timeline. It was a month-by-month plan spanning nearly a year, detailing how Chloe intended to acquire my ring. The early entries focused on monitoring my relationship and identifying vulnerability. The middle entries involved introducing herself to Marcus and beginning their relationship. The final entries outlined exactly how she would manipulate him into buying my ring, once it became available. "She orchestrated our entire relationship," Marcus said, his voice cracked. "She researched my interests, my hobbies, my favorite restaurants. She showed up at places she knew I'd be, made it seem like coincidence when we met. She even tailored her personality to match what she thought I'd want in a girlfriend." I stared at the timeline in horror. According to this plan, Chloe had been working towards stealing my ring for almost a year, before Dylan and I even broke up. She'd been actively sabotaging my relationship while positioning herself to benefit from its destruction. "There's more," Marcus said, opening the manila folder. "She kept printed copies of everything, and she wrote journal entries about the whole thing." He handed me a stack of printed pages covered in Chloe's familiar handwriting. The entries read like the confessions of someone completely detached from reality, someone who saw other people as props in her personal drama, rather than human beings with their own feelings and rights. The first entry was dated 14 months ago, Zoe has everything I've always wanted. The successful career, the perfect boyfriend, the beautiful ring, the admiration of our parents. She doesn't even seem to appreciate it. She complains about Dylan's work schedule like she doesn't realize how lucky she is to have someone who loves her that much. Maybe it's time someone who would appreciate those things had a chance at them. The entries progressed from resentment to active planning, to detailed manipulation strategies. She wrote about identifying Marcus as the perfect target because of his romantic nature and financial stability. She documented how she'd researched his preferences and modified her behavior to appeal to him. She even practiced conversations and planned spontaneous encounters. This entry is from 2 months ago, Marcus said, pointing to a page near the end of the stack. Right around the time I told her I was thinking about proposing. I read Chloe's words with growing horror. Mem is finally ready to propose. I've been showing him ring photos for weeks, especially the sapphire style that Zud. I've trained him to want exactly what she has without him realizing it. Now I just need to wait for the right moment. Zud and Dee are fighting more lately. Their breakup is inevitable. When it happens, I'll be ready. She was waiting for us to break up, I said, the words barely audible. She was actively hoping for it. It gets worse. Keep reading. The final entries detailed Chloe's plan to ensure Dylan would sell the ring quickly and that Marcus would be in the right place at the right time to buy it. She'd researched Henderson's policies and learned that Dylan would likely return there because of their buyback program. She'd convinced Marcus to visit the store multiple times under the guise of browsing so he'd be familiar with their inventory and the sales staff would remember him. She even timed my proposal, Marcus said, bitterly. She knew Dylan was struggling financially because of his freelance work drying up. She knew he'd want to sell the ring as soon as possible. She calculated everything down to the day. The most chilling entry was dated just 1 week before our breakup became final. Almost time. Zud is miserable, D is distant, and M is eager to propose. All the pieces are in place. Soon I'll have everything that should have been mine from the beginning. Zada never deserved any of it anyway. She's always taken her blessings for granted while I've had to fight for everything. It's time for some cosmic justice. I set the papers down with shaking hands. This wasn't sibling rivalry or momentary jealousy. This was systematic psychological warfare conducted by someone I'd loved and trusted my entire life. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry she did this to you. I'm sorry you got caught up in her obsession with me. Don't apologize. You're as much a victim here as I am. He closed the laptop and gathered the papers back into the folder. But there's something else. Something she told me tonight that changes everything. I wasn't sure I could handle any more revelations, but I nodded for him to continue. Your grandmother's inheritance. Chloe said she's been using that money to fund her lifestyle blog, to buy the clothes and experiences she posts about. But that's not the worst part. He paused, looking like he might be sick. She said she's been stealing from your parents small amounts from their accounts, jewelry that belonged to your grandmother, family heirlooms. She's been selling them and using the money to maintain her image. The room spun around me. That's impossible. My parents would notice, not if she was careful, not if she took things they wouldn't miss right away, or if she convinced them they'd misplaced items. She said she's been doing it for years, small amounts at a time. I thought about my parents' house. About the family treasures that had been passed down through generations. My grandmother's pearl necklace that Mom claimed she'd lost during their last move. Dad's vintage watch that had supposedly been stolen during a break-in that never made sense because nothing else was taken. The silver tea set that had belonged to my great-grandmother, which had disappeared from storage. She's been stealing from our family for years, I said, the full scope of Chloe's deception finally becoming clear. Everything about her life, her success, her image, it's all built on theft and lies, and manipulation. She told me tonight that she's done this before, with other people, other boyfriends, other friends, other family members. She finds people who have something she wants, and she systematically destroys their lives to take it. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages from Chloe sent throughout the evening. They started apologetic and desperate, but as Marcus continued to reject her explanations, they became increasingly unhinged. I did it because I love you. You have to understand, I needed you to see how perfect we could be together. Zoe has always had everything handed to her. I just took what should have been mine. You're being ridiculous. So what if I planned it? It doesn't change how we feel about each other. Fine, be angry. But remember, I know things about you too. Things that could ruin your career if they got out. The final message was sent just an hour before Marcus called me. You think you're so noble, giving the ring back to her. She doesn't deserve it. She never deserved anything she had. At least I appreciated it. At least I knew its value. She's threatening you, I said, looking up from the phone. She's desperate. She knows she's lost everything, and she's lashing out at anyone who won't help her maintain her delusions. Marcus took his phone back and deleted the message thread, unblocking her number. I can't deal with any more of this. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us trying to process the magnitude of what we'd discovered. This wasn't just about a stolen ring anymore. This was about a person who had systematically destroyed relationships and stolen from family members for years, all while presenting a false image of success and happiness to the world. What do we do now? I asked finally. I think we have to tell your parents. They deserve to know what she's been doing, especially if she's been stealing from them. The thought of confronting my parents with this information made me feel sick. How do you tell people that one of their daughters has been systematically robbing and manipulating the other? How do you destroy their image of their child while preserving your relationship with them? They won't believe it, I said. Chloe has always been their golden child. She can do no wrong in their eyes. Even with all this evidence, I gestured toward the laptop and folded. Especially with all this evidence, they'll say I'm being vindictive, that I'm jealous of her success, that I'm trying to ruin her happiness because mine was ruined. Marcus nodded slowly. So what's the alternative? We just let her continue stealing from them. Let her find her next victim and do this all over again. I don't know. I honestly don't know. The next morning brought an unexpected ally. Kiara called me at 7 a.m., her voice tight with controlled anger. Zoe, we need to talk. Now, can you meet me at my office? An hour later, I sat across from Kiara's desk while she spread documents across its surface. Legal papers, bank statements, and what looked like a private investigator's report. After our conversation about Chloe, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Kiara's. Something about the whole situation felt familiar, like I'd heard similar stories before, so I called a colleague who specializes in financial crimes and family fraud. She handed me a thick folder. Turns out, Chloe has been busy, very busy. The documents detailed a pattern of behavior spanning several years, and multiple victims. Credit cards opened in family members' names, small but consistent withdrawals from elderly relatives' accounts, insurance claims for jewelry and electronics that had never actually been stolen. A web of financial manipulation that painted Chloe as a sophisticated con artist, rather than a troubled sister, making bad choices. She's stolen over $100,000 in the past 3 years, Kiara said. From your parents, your grandparents before they died, even from you. That identity theft alert you got last year, that wasn't a random data breach. She opened a credit card in your name, and used it for 6 months, before you caught it. I remembered the incident clearly. My credit monitoring service had alerted me to a new account I hadn't opened. When I'd called the credit card company, they'd said it was likely fraud, and helped me close the account. I'd never suspected anyone I knew. Certainly not my own sister. How did you find all this? Once we knew what to look for, it wasn't hard. She used the same methods repeatedly, just changed the targets. The private investigator I hired used to work financial crimes for the FBI. He said this is one of the most systematic cases of family fraud he's ever seen. Kiara pulled out another document, this one with photos attached. She's also been running fake charity drives through her social media. People donate money thinking it's going to legitimate causes, but she's keeping it for herself. That's federal wire fraud, Zoe. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is serious criminal activity. I stared at the evidence spread across Kiara's desk, trying to reconcile this image of Chloe as a criminal mastermind with the sister who'd brought me soup when I was sick and helped me move into my first apartment. What do I do with this information? You have several options. You can take this to the police and file charges. You can confront your parents privately and let them decide how to handle it. Or you can confront Chloe directly and give her a chance to make restitution before involving authorities. What would you do? Kiara leaned back in her chair, her expression grim. Honestly, I'd file charges. This level of systematic fraud doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen because someone made bad choices or got in over their head. This is the behavior of someone who sees other people as resources to be exploited. And it's not going to stop until she faces real consequences. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house in Beaverton, the folder of evidence beside me on the passenger seat. I'd made the decision to talk to them first, to give them a chance to process the information before deciding whether to involve law enforcement. Mom and Dad were in their garden when I arrived, working together to plant their annual vegetable garden. They looked so peaceful, so content with their quiet suburban life, that I almost turned around and left without saying anything. But I knew that Chloe's crimes would eventually come to light one way or another. It was better for them to hear it from me. "Zoe, sweetheart," Mom called out when she saw me walking across the yard. "What a nice surprise. We were just discussing whether to plant tomatoes or peppers in this corner." Dad looked up from the soil he was turning, his face breaking into the warm smile that had made me feel safe my entire childhood. "Vote for tomatoes. Your mother makes the best sauce in Oregon." I sat with them on their back patio while they cleaned the dirt from their hands and poured glasses of lemonade. The normal domesticity of the moment made what I was about to tell them seem even more surreal. "I need to talk to you both about something serious." Mom's expression immediately shifted to concern. "Is she okay? Has something happened?" "In a way, yes. Something has happened. Something that's been happening for years, actually." I opened the folder and began laying out the evidence systematically, the way Kiara had taught me. Financial records first, showing the pattern of unauthorized transactions, then the identity theft documentation. Finally, the evidence of her manipulation and planning around my engagement ring. My parents listened in stunned silence, their faces cycling through disbelief, confusion, and growing horror, as the scope of Chloe's deception became clear. "This is impossible," Mom said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Chloe wouldn't do these things. She's successful. She has her own money from her blog. Why would she need to steal from us?" "Because her success is fake," I said gently. "The blog, the lifestyle, the perfect image she presents online, it's all funded by theft. She's been stealing from our family to maintain a facade." Dad picked up one of the bank statements, studying it with the careful attention he'd always given to important documents. "These withdrawals, they're small amounts. We probably wouldn't have noticed them individually." That's exactly what she was counting on. Small amounts over time, from multiple sources. It adds up to a substantial sum, but it's spread out enough that no single victim would notice right away. Mom was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she looked through the evidence. But the ring, manipulating that poor boy, planning to steal from her own sister. "I don't understand how someone could be so calculating." "I don't understand it either, Mom, but the evidence is clear. And I told them about the fake charity drives, the stolen family heirlooms, the systematic manipulation of Marcus and other boyfriends. With each revelation, my parents seemed to shrink further into themselves, as if the weight of their daughter's crimes was physically crushing them. "What do we do?" Dad asked finally. "How do we handle something like this?" "That's up to you. But I need you to know that if you choose not to address this, she'll continue. She'll find new victims, new ways to steal and manipulate, and eventually, her crimes will catch up with her in ways that none of us can protect her from." That evening, my parents called Chloe and asked her to come to their house for a family meeting. She agreed immediately, probably thinking they wanted to discuss wedding plans or offer their support during her difficult time with Marcus. When she arrived, I was already there, sitting at the dining room table with the evidence laid out in front of me. The moment she saw the documents, her entire demeanor changed. The bright, confident energy she usually radiated vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. "What is this?" she asked, but her tone suggested she already knew. "Sit down, Chloe," Dad said firmly. "We need to talk." For the next 2 hours, we confronted my sister with the evidence of her crimes. She denied everything at first, claiming the documents were fabricated, that I was trying to destroy her out of jealousy and spite. But as the evidence mounted, her denials became less convincing and more desperate. Finally, when faced with bank records showing her electronic signature on unauthorized transfers, she broke down completely. "I never meant for it to go this far," she sobbed. "It started small, just borrowing a little money here and there, but the blog took off, and I had to maintain the image. People expected me to live a certain lifestyle, to have nice things, to travel and attend events. I couldn't disappoint them." "So you disappointed your family instead," Mom said quietly. "You stole from us, you lied to us, you manipulated and betrayed your own sister." Zoe has always had everything. Chloe's grief transformed into anger in an instant. The perfect grades, the successful career, the loving boyfriend, the beautiful ring. She never had to fight for anything. It all just fell into her lap while I had to scrape and struggle for every opportunity. "That's not true," I said, my own anger finally surfacing. "I worked for everything I have. I put myself through school. I built my career from nothing. I maintained my relationship with Dylan, through good times and bad. You could have done the same, instead of stealing from me." "You don't understand what it's like to live in someone's shadow," Chloe shot back. "To always be the younger sister, the less successful one, the one who couldn't quite measure up. Do you know what it's like to watch someone have everything you want and know you'll never get it honestly?" "So you decided to take it dishonestly," Dad said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You decided that because life wasn't fair, you had the right to steal from your own family." The confrontation continued for another hour, with Chloe alternating between tearful apologies and angry justifications. She promised to pay everything back, to make amends, to get help for what she claimed was a shopping addiction that had spiraled out of control. But her promises felt hollow, scripted, like another manipulation designed to avoid consequences. When Mom asked her directly if she felt any genuine remorse for what she'd done to me and Marcus, Chloe's answer was telling. "I'm sorry it turned out this way," she said. "I'm sorry everyone got hurt, but I'm not sorry for trying to build a better life for myself." That night, after Chloe left with promises to return the stolen jewelry and begin paying restitution, my parents and I sat in their living room processing what had happened. "We failed her somehow," Mom said, her voice thick with guilt. "We must have done something wrong, given her some reason to feel like she had to steal and lie to get what she wanted." "You didn't fail her," I said firmly. "You gave both of us the same love, the same opportunities, the same support. The difference is that I chose to build my life honestly, and she chose to build hers on theft and deception. That's not your fault." Dad nodded slowly. "Your mother and I need time to process this. But I think we have to involve the police. If we don't, we're enabling her to continue hurting other people." I agreed, though the thought of my sister facing criminal charges made my heart ache. Despite everything she'd done, I still loved her. But I was beginning to understand that sometimes loving someone means holding them accountable for their actions, even when it's painful. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how completely my understanding of my family had been shattered in the course of a week. The sister I'd thought I knew was a carefully constructed facade, hiding a person capable of stunning cruelty and systematic manipulation. But in losing the sister I thought I had, I'd gained something more valuable. And with the truth came the power to make real decisions about my future, decisions based on reality rather than the comfortable lies I'd been living with for years. The road ahead would be difficult. There would be criminal charges, family trauma, and the painful process of rebuilding relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was moving forward with my eyes open, seeing my life and my family clearly. And that clarity, painful as it was, felt like freedom. The Portland Police Bureau's white brick building felt imposing in the gray morning light. As I walked up the steps with Kira beside me, I carried a briefcase filled with evidence that would likely send my sister to prison, and despite everything she'd done, the weight of that responsibility made my hands shake. Detective Sarah Reeves was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She'd handled financial crimes for over a decade, Kira had told me, and had a reputation for being thorough and fair. When we sat down in her small office overlooking the Willamette River, She spread our documents across her desk with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen every kind of family betrayal imaginable. "This is quite a comprehensive case you've brought me," Detective Reeves said after reviewing the evidence for 20 minutes. "Wire fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, systematic theft from family members. Your sister has been busy. How serious are the charges she's facing?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Very serious. The federal charges alone for the fake charity scheme could result in significant prison time. Add in the identity theft, the financial abuse of elderly family members, and the systematic fraud, and we're looking at potentially decades in prison if she's convicted on all counts." The reality of what I was doing hit me like a physical blow. I was turning in my own sister, the person who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and shared countless family dinners with. But I reminded myself of Marcus's devastated face, of my parents' tears, of the unknown victims who'd donated money to Chloe's fake charities thinking they were helping legitimate causes. "What happens now?" Kira asked. "We'll open a formal investigation. I'll need statements from all the victims, copies of financial records, and any additional evidence you can provide. We'll also need to interview Ms. Hartwell herself." Detective Reeves closed the folder and looked at me directly. "I have to ask, Ms. Hartwell, are you prepared for what comes next? Once we file charges, this becomes public record. Your family will be under scrutiny, possibly media attention. Your sister will likely blame you for ruining her life." "She ruined her own life," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I'm just making sure she faces consequences for it." 2 days later, Detective Reeves called to inform me that they'd arrested Chloe at her apartment. She'd been charged with multiple felonies and was being held pending a bail hearing. The news felt surreal, like something happening to someone else's family rather than my own. My parents took the arrest hard. Mom barely spoke for 3 days, moving around their house like a ghost, while Dad threw himself into research, reading everything he could find about financial crimes and legal proceedings. They'd hired a criminal defense attorney for Chloe despite my protests, claiming they couldn't abandon their daughter even if they couldn't support her actions. "She's still our child," Mom said when I questioned their decision to pay for her legal defense. "Whatever she's done, we can't just walk away from her." I understood their position, but it frustrated me to see them continuing to enable Chloe's behavior even after everything she'd done. Some part of me wondered if their willingness to rescue her from consequences was part of what had created this monster in the first place. The arraignment was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late April. I attended with my parents, sitting in the gallery of the Multnomah County Courthouse, while Chloe stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit that made her look younger and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. She pleaded not guilty to all charges, which her attorney had warned us to expect. The bail was set at $50,000, an amount that would have been impossible for most people but was easily within my parents' means. As we left the courthouse, I knew they would pay it, and Chloe would be free pending trial. What I didn't expect was for Chloe to call me that same evening. "Zoe, please, I need to talk to you." Her voice was different over the phone, smaller and more fragile than the confident persona she usually projected. "Can you meet me somewhere? Just for coffee?" Every instinct I had told me to refuse, but curiosity won out over caution, and I agreed to meet her at a neutral cafe in Southeast Portland, far from any place that held memories for either of us. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she clearly hadn't touched. The past week had aged her dramatically. Her usually perfect hair hung limp around her face, she wore no makeup, and her clothes looked like she'd slept in them. For the first time in our adult lives, she looked like the younger sister. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm not sure why I did." We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before Chloe spoke again. "I know you hate me. I know you think I'm a monster. But I need you to understand that I never meant for things to go this far." "How far did you mean for them to go, Chloe? When you started stealing from our grandparents, what was your end game? When you planned to manipulate Marcus into buying my ring, where did you think it would lead?" She flinched at the directness of my questions. "I thought I could control it. I thought I could take what I needed, and no one would get hurt. I never meant to hurt you specifically, but you did hurt me," specifically and deliberate. You didn't just steal my ring, you stole my relationship, my trust, my sense of safety in my own family. You made me question everything I thought I knew about the people I love. Tears began streaming down her face, but I found myself unmoved by them. I'd seen Chloe cry many times over the years, usually when she wanted something or was trying to avoid consequences. Her tears had lost their power to manipulate me. I was jealous, she said finally. I've been jealous of you our entire lives. You made everything look so easy. School, work, relationships, even dealing with our parents. You just glided through life like you were meant for success, while I had to fight for every scrap of attention or achievement. That's not true, and you know it. I worked hard for everything I achieved. I studied, I took risks, I made sacrifices. The difference is that you were looking for shortcuts, while I was doing the work. Maybe, she admitted, but it felt different from where I was standing. It felt like the universe had favorites, and you were one of them. I studied my sister's face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse or understanding. What I saw instead was self-pity disguised as confession, manipulation dressed up as vulnerability. Do you actually feel bad about what you did to me and Marcus, or do you just feel bad that you got caught? The question hung between us for a long moment, before Chloe answered. Both, I think. I feel terrible that you were hurt, but I also feel like you overreacted, like you could have just talked to me instead of calling the police. Overreacted? I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. Chloe, you committed multiple felonies. You stole from our elderly grandparents. You manipulated an innocent man into participating in your scheme. You defrauded charitable donors. What part of that deserved a conversation rather than criminal charges? We're family, she said desperately. Family is supposed to protect each other, not destroy each other. You destroyed our family the moment you decided to treat us like marks in a con game. I'm not destroying anything, I'm just refusing to be complicit in covering up your crime. We talked for another 30 minutes, but the conversation went in circles. Chloe alternated between tearful apologies and subtle attempts to shift blame, never quite accepting full responsibility for the devastation she'd caused. When I finally left the cafe, I felt emotionally drained but oddly relieved. Seeing her desperation and continued manipulation confirmed that I'd made the right choice in involving law enforcement. The next several months passed in a blur of legal proceedings, family therapy sessions, and attempts to rebuild some sense of normalcy. The local news picked up Chloe's story when her social media fraud came to light, and I found myself dealing with reporters calling for comments, and former followers of her blog reaching out to share their own stories of being deceived. Marcus and I maintained a cautious friendship throughout the ordeal. He testified before the grand jury about his role as an unwitting accomplice in Chloe's ring scheme, and his testimony was crucial in establishing the pattern of manipulation that strengthened the prosecution's case. I keep wondering what would have happened if you hadn't figured it out, he told me one afternoon, as we sat in my favorite coffee shop, the same place where we'd first discussed the ring's true origins. Would I have married her? Would I have spent years being manipulated without realizing? Probably, I said honestly. She's very good at what she does. The scary thing is that she genuinely believes her own justifications. In her mind, she's the victim of an unfair world just taking what should have been hers all along. Have you talked to her since that day at the cafe? No, my parents see her regularly, but I've made it clear that I don't want contact until she's served her sentence and completed significant therapy. Maybe not even then. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand why you chose criminal charges over family intervention now. This wasn't going to stop on its own. The trial began in October, 6 months after Chloe's arrest. The prosecution had built a compelling case documenting years of systematic fraud and manipulation. They presented evidence of the fake charity schemes, the identity theft, the financial abuse of elderly family members, and the elaborate plan to steal my engagement ring. Chloe's defense attorney argued that she suffered from shopping addiction and depression that had led her to make poor choices. They portrayed her as a troubled young woman who'd gotten in over her head, rather than a calculating criminal who'd preyed on family members and romantic partners. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified on the second day, walking the jury through the timeline of discovering my ring on Chloe's finger and the subsequent investigation that revealed the scope of her crimes. It was emotionally devastating to recount the betrayal in such clinical detail, but I forced myself to remain composed and factual. Chloe's testimony on her own behalf was the most painful part of the trial for me. She wept convincingly as she described her struggles with mental health and financial pressure. She apologized repeatedly to the victims, including me, and claimed that she'd been planning to return everything she'd stolen once her blog became profitable enough to support her lifestyle legitimately. But under cross-examination, the prosecution exposed the contradictions in her story. They showed that her crimes had escalated over time rather than decreasing, that she'd continued stealing even after her blog began generating income, and that her planning documents showed no evidence of any intention to make restitution. The most damaging moment came when the prosecutor asked her directly whether she felt her actions were wrong at the time she committed them. "I knew they were technically wrong," Chloe answered carefully, "but I felt like I was taking from people who had more than they needed, and wouldn't miss what I took. It felt like balancing the scales rather than stealing." "So you felt entitled to your grandmother's jewelry because she wouldn't miss it? She was in a nursing home. She couldn't wear it anymore. You felt entitled to your sister's engagement ring because you thought you would appreciate it more than she did. I just thought it was a waste for it to sit in a drawer when it could make someone happy. And you felt entitled to money donated to fake charities because the donors had disposable income." For the first time, Chloe hesitated. "I'd say that was different. I was planning to donate to real charities once I had enough money." "But you never actually made any charitable donations, did you, Miss Hartwell?" "I was building up to it. Over 3 years, you collected over $40,000 in fake charitable donations, and you made 0 contributions to any legitimate charity, correct?" "Yes, but thank you." No further questions. The jury deliberated for less than a day before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Chloe showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, sitting perfectly still beside her attorney while our parents wept quietly in the gallery behind her. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later, giving the defense time to prepare mitigation arguments and the prosecution time to file victim impact statement. I spent those weeks writing and rewriting my statement, trying to capture the full scope of how Chloe's betrayal had affected not just me, but our entire family and all her other victims. On sentencing day, the courtroom was packed with victims and their family. I was surprised to see how many people had been affected by Chloe's schemes: elderly donors who'd contributed to her fake charities, former friends who'd discovered money or jewelry missing after Chloe visited their home, even some of her blog followers who felt deceived by her false image. The judge, Honorable Margaret Chen, was known for thoughtful sentencing that balanced punishment with rehabilitation. She listened carefully as victim after victim described how Chloe's actions had affected their lives, their ability to trust others, their financial security. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium with my statement in hand, but found myself setting it aside and speaking from the heart instead. "Your Honor, Chloe Hartwell is my sister, and I love her. That's what makes this so devastating. The person who hurt me most deeply is someone I trusted completely, someone I would have done anything to help if she'd just asked honestly." I looked at Chloe as I spoke, but she stared straight ahead, refusing to meet my eyes. She didn't just steal material things from me and our family. She stole our sense of safety, our ability to trust our own judgment, our faith in the people closest to us. She made us question every interaction we'd had with her, wondering what was real and what was manipulation. I paused, collecting my thoughts before continuing. I don't say this out of vindictiveness, but out of genuine concern for future victims. Chloe shows no real remorse for her actions. Even now, she sees herself as the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of her own downfall. Without significant intervention and consequences, she will continue to hurt people. I hope that whatever sentence you impose will include mandatory therapy and education about the impact of financial crimes on victims, because until Chloe understands the real harm she's caused, she'll never be safe to be around vulnerable people. I also hope that someday, my sister can become the person I thought she was. But that can only happen if she faces the full consequences of what she's done and does the hard work of understanding why she did it. When all the victim statements had been read, Chloe's attorney made a final plea for leniency, emphasizing her youth, her mental health struggles, and her potential for rehabilitation. The prosecutor argued for a substantial sentence that would reflect the serious nature of her crimes and deter others from similar behavior. Finally, Judge Chen spoke. Ms. Hartwell, you have been convicted of serious crimes that demonstrate a pattern of calculated deception spanning several years. Your actions have caused significant financial and emotional harm to numerous victims, including your own family members. While I acknowledge the mental health issues raised by your defense, I find no evidence that these issues prevented you from understanding that your actions were wrong. Your own planning documents show sophisticated understanding of the legal and ethical boundaries you were crossing. The most troubling aspect of this case is your continued refusal to accept full responsibility for your action. Even in your testimony, you sought to justify your behavior and minimize its impact on your victims. Chloe stood as the judge prepared to pronounce sentence, her attorney's hand on her shoulder for support. On the federal charges, I sentence you to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. On the state charges, I sentence you to an additional 2 years, to be served concurrently. You will also pay full restitution to all victims, participate in mandatory financial counseling, and perform 500 hours of community service upon your release. I hope you will use your time in prison to reflect on the harm you've caused and to develop genuine empathy for your victim. Until you do that, you will remain a danger to anyone who trusts you. As the bailiff led Chloe away in handcuffs, she finally looked at me. For just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that might have been recognition, maybe even the beginning of real remorse. But then, she turned away, and I knew it would be years before I saw her again. Outside the courthouse, my parents and I stood together in the afternoon sunlight, emotionally exhausted, but oddly relieved that this chapter was finally over. "I'm proud of you," Dad said quietly. "I know this was the hardest thing you've ever done, but it was the right thing." Mom nodded, though tears still streamed down her face. "I hope someday she'll understand that you saved her from herself, that you loved her enough to stop enabling her destruction." That evening, I drove to Henderson's Fine Jewelry for the first time since this nightmare began. I'd made an appointment with Mrs. Henderson to return my engagement ring one final time. "Are you sure about this, dear?" she asked as I placed the velvet box on her counter. "It's such a beautiful piece, and it holds so many memories." "That's exactly why I can't keep it," I said. "It doesn't represent love anymore. It represents manipulation and betrayal. I need it to go to someone who can love it for what it is, not what it was." Mrs. Henderson nodded understandingly. "I'll make sure it finds a good home, someone who will appreciate its beauty without its baggage." As I walked out of the jewelry store for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in months. The ring was gone. Chloe was facing consequences for her actions, and I was finally free to build a life based on truth rather than comfortable lies. The road ahead would still be difficult. There would be family gatherings where Chloe's absence created an uncomfortable void. There would be questions from friends and extended family about what had happened. There would be the long process of rebuilding trust and learning to recognize red flags I'd missed before. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was moving forward with my eyes open, armed with hard-earned wisdom about the difference between unconditional love and unconditional enabling. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to protect them from the consequences of their choices. And I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, capable of surviving betrayal and loss while holding on to my values and integrity. Whatever came next, I would face it with the confidence that comes from knowing you've done the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing you'd ever done. 6 months after Chloe's sentencing, I woke up in my Pearl District apartment to sunlight streaming through windows I'd finally gotten around to cleaning. The space felt different now, lighter somehow, as if removing the weight of family secrets had literally changed the atmosphere. I'd redecorated gradually over the winter, replacing pieces that reminded me of the life I'd thought I was building with Dylan and adding elements that reflected who I was becoming rather than who I'd been. The graphic design studio I'd started in January was thriving beyond my wildest expectations. Working for myself had been a terrifying leap after years of corporate security, but it turned out that surviving family betrayal had given me a different perspective on professional risk. When you've lived through your sister stealing your engagement ring and defrauding your entire family, the possibility of a failed business venture seems manageable by comparison. My first major client had been a nonprofit focused on elder financial abuse prevention, a cause that had obvious personal significance. The irony wasn't lost on me that Chloe's crimes had led directly to my most meaningful work. The organization's director, Elena Vasquez, had become both a valued client and an unexpected friend. "You have a unique understanding of how financial manipulation affects families," Elena had told me during our initial meeting. "Your design work captures that emotional impact in a way that statistics alone never could." The campaign we'd created together had won several industry awards and led to more nonprofit clients, each working on causes related to fraud prevention, family recovery, or victim advocacy. I'd found my professional niche in the wreckage of my personal catastrophe. That Thursday morning brought an email that made me pause over my coffee. The subject line read, "Victim restitution payment." I'd been receiving these automated notifications every month since Chloe began serving her sentence. Small amounts deducted from her prison commissary account, and whatever assets the court had been able to see. The total so far was less than 5% of what she'd stolen from our family alone, let alone her other victims. The detective had warned us that full restitution was unlikely, especially given that most of the money had been spent on maintaining her lifestyle rather than invested or saved. Still, each payment felt symbolic, a formal acknowledgement of harm done and consequences faced. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Dad's birthday dinner Sunday, 6 p.m. Hope you can make." These family gatherings had been awkward at first, with Chloe's absence hanging over every conversation like a ghost no one wanted to acknowledge. But gradually we'd learned to be a family of 3 instead of 4, to create new traditions that didn't revolve around managing Chloe's drama or enabling her behavior. I texted back my confirmation and made a mental note to pick up the vintage watch Dad had been admiring at an antique shop downtown. After years of Chloe stealing family heirlooms, I developed an appreciation for giving gifts that created new happy memories rather than replacing stolen ones. The design studio occupied half of a converted warehouse in the Alberta Arts District, a space I shared with a small collective of creative professionals. My neighbor was a ceramic artist named James, who specialized in pieces inspired by Pacific Northwest landscape. We developed an easy friendship based on shared work schedules and a mutual appreciation for good coffee. "You seem lighter lately," James observed, that afternoon, as we took a break in the shared kitchen space. He was right, though it was hard to articulate exactly what had changed. The constant anxiety that had plagued me for months after discovering Chloe's betrayal had gradually faded, replaced by something that felt like genuine peace, rather than mere absence of drama. "I think I'm finally learning the difference between healing and just not hurting," I said. For a while I thought feeling okay meant I was moving on, but I was really just numb. Now I feel like I'm actually building something new instead of just trying to forget something old. Therapy helped. I'd started seeing Dr. Patricia Kim, a therapist who specialized in family trauma and betrayal, about 4 months earlier. The decision had come after a particularly difficult night when I'd found myself unable to trust my own judgment about a new client's motivation. If Chloe could fool me so completely for so long, how could I trust my ability to read other people's intentions? "Therapy is helping," I confirmed. "She's taught me that hypervigilance isn't the same as wisdom." I was so focused on never being fooled again that I was suspicious of everyone, even people who deserved my trust. Dr. Kim had helped me understand that betrayal trauma creates a specific kind of recovery challenge. Unlike other forms of trauma that come from strangers or circumstances, Family betrayal forces you to rebuild your ability to trust while maintaining relationships with people connected to your betrayer. The work wasn't just about forgiving Chloe or protecting myself from future manipulation. It was about learning to trust my own perceptions again. That evening, I attended a support group for families affected by financial crime. The group met monthly in the basement of a community center in Southeast Portland, bringing together people whose lives had been upended by the financial betrayal of family members or romantic partner. Tonight's discussion focused on a question that had been central to my own recovery. How do you maintain family relationships when one family member has committed crimes against others? Sarah, a woman in her 50s whose son had embezzled from his elderly father, spoke about the impossible balance between love and accountability. I love my son, but I can't pretend what he did was okay just because he's my child. My husband thinks I'm being too harsh by supporting criminal charges, but my father-in-law deserves justice, even if it means my son goes to prison. David, whose brother had run a Ponzi scheme that victimized their entire extended family, nodded in understanding. My wife keeps asking when I'm going to get over it and forgive my brother. She doesn't understand that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it never happened or trusting him again. When it was my turn to share, I found myself talking about something Kim and I had discussed extensively: the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. I've forgiven my sister in the sense that I don't carry anger about what she did anymore, I said, but forgiveness doesn't mean I trust her or want a relationship with her. It just means I've stopped letting her actions control my emotional state. An older woman named Ruth, whose daughter had stolen her retirement savings, asked a question that caught me off guard. Do you ever miss who you thought she was? The question hit deeper than I'd expected. I did miss the sister I'd thought I had, the woman who'd brought me Thai food when I was heartbroken and celebrated my professional successes with genuine enthusiasm. But I'd come to understand that person had never really existed. She'd been a carefully crafted persona designed to maintain access to victims and avoid suspicion. I miss the relationship I thought we had, I answered finally. But I don't miss the constant anxiety of trying to understand why someone who claimed to love me kept hurting me. I don't miss making excuses for behavior that never made sense. I don't miss feeling like I was failing as a sister because I couldn't fix problems I didn't even know existed. After the meeting, I drove through Portland's rain-slicked streets, thinking about Ruth's question and my response to it. The truth was more complicated than what I'd shared with the group. I did miss Chloe sometimes, or at least I missed having a sister. I missed the idea of family gatherings where everyone was present and accounted for. I missed feeling like I came from a normal family with ordinary problems. But I'd learned that nostalgia could be as dangerous as denial. Missing the good times with Chloe could easily slide into minimizing the bad ones, into making excuses for inexcusable behavior, into enabling future harm. The work of recovery wasn't just about healing from past betrayal. It was about staying clear-eyed enough to prevent future manipulation. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it an unexpected opportunity. Marcus had reached out through a mutual friend to let me know he was moving to Seattle for a new job, and wanted to return something that belonged to me. We met at a coffee shop in Hawthorne, the neighborhood where I'd once imagined building a life with Dylan. Marcus looked healthier than I'd seen him since before Chloe's arrest. The hollow, devastated expression he'd worn throughout the trial had been replaced by something calmer and more resilient. He'd cut his hair shorter and had the slight tan of someone who'd been spending more time outdoors. "You look good," I said as we settled into a corner booth with our drink. "Seattle treating you well. The job is great, and the change of scenery has been exactly what I needed," he replied. "It's amazing how much clearer everything becomes when you're not surrounded by reminders." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small jewelry box I didn't recognize. "This is yours. I found it in some of Chloe's things that she'd left at my apartment. I probably should have returned it sooner, but honestly I needed time before I could deal with anything connected to her." Inside the box was my grandmother's silver bracelet, the one Mom had claimed went missing during their last move. It was a delicate piece with small charms representing different family milestones, something my grandmother had worn every day until arthritis made it too difficult to manage the clasp. She told me this was a family heirloom she'd inherited from her grandmother, Marcus said quietly. She wore it to dinner with my parents when they visited. I remember thinking it was sweet that she treasured something with so much family history. Even now, months after learning the scope of Chloe's deception, new revelations could still take my breath away. She'd stolen a piece of our family history and worn it while playing the role of devoted granddaughter to my face. The calculated cruelty of it was staggering. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, clearly recognizing the shock on my face. "I'm okay," I said, and realized I meant it. I'm just constantly amazed by how thorough her deception was. She didn't just steal objects. She stole stories, memories, family connections. She wore our grandmother's bracelet while pretending to be someone worthy of inheriting family treasure. We talked for another hour about our respective recovery journeys. Marcus had also started therapy and had joined a support group for people who'd been romantically involved with individuals with personality disorder. He'd learned that his experience with Chloe fit a pattern common among narcissistic manipulators, the idealization phase where they present a perfect version of themselves, followed by gradual devaluation and manipulation once their target is emotionally invested. "The hardest part," he said, "was accepting that the woman I fell in love with never existed. I kept thinking that if I could just understand what went wrong, maybe I could fix it. But there was nothing to fix because the whole foundation was built on lies." "Do you think you'll ever want to try dating again?" I asked. "Eventually, maybe, but not until I'm confident in my ability to recognize red flags." Chloe was so good at appearing perfect that I ignored my instincts when things didn't quite add up. I never want to be that vulnerable to manipulation again. As we prepared to leave, Marcus asked a question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Do you think she'll ever actually change, or will she just get better at hiding what she is?" It was a question I'd posed to Dr. Kim numerous times. Her response had been both hopeful and realistic. Genuine change was possible for people with narcissistic and antisocial traits, but only if they developed authentic empathy and took full responsibility for their actions. Most people with Chloe's pattern of behavior never reached that level of self-awareness, because it required confronting fundamental beliefs about their entitlement and superiority. "I hope she changes," I told Marcus honestly, "but I've accepted that I'll probably never know if she does. And more importantly, I've learned that my recovery doesn't depend on her transformation. I can build a good life regardless of whether she becomes a better person." That weekend, I returned my grandmother's bracelet to Mom during Dad's birthday dinner. She cried when she saw it, holding the piece gently as if it might disappear again. "I was heartbroken when I thought I'd lost this," she said. "Your grandmother gave it to me the day you were born, told me to add a charm for each of my daughter's major milestones. I'd planned to pass it on to one of you girls someday." "Maybe you still can," I suggested. "Maybe we can add new charms for new memories, create something that celebrates moving forward instead of dwelling on what was lost." Dad smiled at the suggestion. "I like that idea, forward movement instead of backward dwelling." We spent the evening looking through old photo albums and sharing stories about my grandmother, deliberately focusing on happy memories rather than dwelling on Chloe's absence. It was a celebration that felt genuine rather than forced, a family gathering that wasn't defined by managing someone else's drama or walking on emotional eggshells. As summer approached, I received an unexpected letter forwarded from the prison where Chloe was serving her sentence. The envelope was addressed in her familiar handwriting, but something about the formation of the letters looked different, less confident somehow. I almost threw it away without reading it. Kim and I had discussed the possibility that Chloe might try to contact me, and we'd agreed that I wasn't ready for direct communication, but curiosity won out over caution, and I opened the letter in the privacy of my apartment. The content was unlike anything I'd expected from Chloe. Instead of manipulation or self-pity, it was a straightforward acknowledgement of responsibility and harm caused. She wrote about the therapy she'd been participating in, and the gradual recognition of how her actions had affected others. She apologized specifically for the pain she'd caused me, Marcus, our parents, and her other victims, without making excuses or asking for forgiveness. The letter ended with a paragraph that surprised me with its insight. I understand that you may never want to see or speak to me again, and I respect that decision. I'm writing this not because I expect anything from you, but because my therapist says that taking responsibility means acknowledging harm even when forgiveness isn't possible. I hope someday I can become someone worthy of the family I was born into, but I know that's my work to do, not yours. I read the letter 3 times before setting it aside. It sounded like genuine remorse, but I'd been fooled by Chloe's performances before. Whether this represented real change or just a more sophisticated manipulation didn't ultimately matter for my own healing. I could acknowledge her apparent growth without trusting it, appreciate her apology without feeling obligated to respond to it. Dr. Kim had taught me that healing didn't require forgiveness, reconciliation, or even understanding why someone had hurt me. It only required that I stop allowing their actions to dictate my emotional state and life choices. Whether Chloe was genuinely changing or just getting better at appearing remorseful was her issue to resolve, not mine. That autumn, I met someone who challenged my assumptions about post-betrayal dating. Alex was a freelance photographer who'd been hired to document one of my nonprofit campaigns. She was funny and direct in a way that felt refreshing after years of navigating Chloe's subtle manipulation. When she asked me out for coffee after our professional collaboration ended, I surprised myself by saying yes. Our first few dates were exercises in radical honesty. I told her about Chloe's betrayal and my ongoing recovery work. She shared her own story of rebuilding trust after her ex-husband's affair and financial deception. We compared notes on therapy insights and red flags, approaching the possibility of romance with the wariness of people who'd learned that love alone wasn't enough to protect you from harm. I used to think that if someone loved me, they wouldn't hurt me, Alex said during one of our walks along the Willamette River. Now I understand that people can love you and hurt you simultaneously, especially if they're not capable of putting your well-being ahead of their own needs. My therapist calls it love with conditions, I replied. Some people love you only as long as you serve their purposes or reflect well on them. When you stop being useful or start holding them accountable, the love disappears. So how do we trust again? How do we tell the difference between healthy love and conditional love? It was a question I'd been grappling with for months. The answer wasn't simple, but it was becoming clearer as I continued my recovery work. I think it starts with trusting ourselves, learning to recognize our own feelings and needs, instead of constantly adapting to other people's expectations. If someone truly loves us, they'll want us to be authentic rather than trying to shape us into what they want us to be. Dating Alex felt different from any relationship I'd experienced before. There was no rush to merge our lives or make grand declarations. Instead, we built trust gradually, paying attention to how we treated each other during disagreements and stressful moments. We respected each other's boundaries and healing processes without trying to fix or save each other. 6 months into our relationship, Alex asked me something that made me realize how far I'd come in my recovery. Do you think you'll ever want to get engaged again? Not necessarily to me, but in general. The question didn't send me into panic or flashbacks the way it would have a year earlier. Instead, I found myself considering it thoughtfully, without the weight of past betrayal defining my answer. Maybe, but not until I'm confident that I want to share my life with someone because it would enhance both our lives, not because I need them to complete me or validate my worth. And rings? Would you want another engagement ring? I smiled at the question. Definitely not a sapphire. But yeah, I think I'd want a ring that represented our relationship rather than carrying baggage from someone else's story. As we entered our 2nd year together, I realized that my relationship with Alex was the first truly healthy partnership I'd ever experienced. There were no games, no hidden agendas, no emotional manipulation disguised as love. We showed up honestly for each other, respected each other's autonomy, and built something together rather than one person trying to take from the other. The business continued to thrive, My family relationships grew stronger without Chloe's toxic influence, and I developed a sense of inner stability that didn't depend on external validation. I still received monthly restitution payments from Chloe's case, tiny amounts that served as reminders of justice served rather than sources of significant financial recovery. Sometimes people asked if I regretted turning Chloe in, if I wished I'd handled the situation differently to preserve family relationships. The answer was always the same. I regretted that she'd made choices that required such drastic intervention, but I didn't regret holding her accountable for those choices. The sister I'd thought I knew had been a fiction, carefully crafted to maintain access to victims and avoid consequence. The real Chloe was someone capable of calculated cruelty and systematic manipulation of people who loved her. Protecting myself and future victims from that reality wasn't betrayal, it was survival. As I write this, it's been 2 years since I first saw my engagement ring on Chloe's finger at that devastating family party. 2 years since my world imploded and I learned that the people closest to us can sometimes be the most dangerous. 2 years since I made the hardest decision of my life and chose truth over family loyalty, justice over comfortable denial. The journey from victim to survivor to someone who's genuinely thriving hasn't been easy or straightforward. There have been setbacks, moments of doubt, times when I questioned whether I'd made the right choices. But I've learned that healing isn't a destination you reach, it's a way of living that prioritizes truth over comfort, growth over stagnation, authentic relationships over convenient ones. I don't know if Chloe will ever become someone capable of genuine love, rather than selfish manipulation. I don't know if our family will ever fully recover from the damage her choices caused. But I know that I've built a life based on honesty, hard work and relationships with people who see and value my authentic self. And I know that the next time someone tries to manipulate or betray me, I'll recognize the warning signs and protect myself accordingly. Because the most important thing I've learned from this nightmare is that I'm strong enough to choose difficult truths over comfortable lies, even when it costs me everything I thought I wanted, especially then. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.